Hello, everybody. An impromptu one again. I got a few emails from Matt Osborne, whose Substack I've been enjoying, and he started talking about a very interesting phenomenon, indigo children, which some of you may know about, but it was totally new to me. And he has a lot of thoughts on the recurring existence of supposedly special children. Of which trans kids are simply the most recent example. So let me bring him in and say hello to him very quickly. He's got a Chromebook and the camera isn't great, so
sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's livable with. Matt, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about what is your background?
Hopefully this is working.
Oh, it's frozen, of course. No, we're back. Okay. What is your background, and what is your interest in these subjects?
Well, first of all, I'm a history student in graduate school now. So history, obviously, American history in particular, because American history has had religion as a driver for a long time. And a lot of your friends over there, your TERF friends, are telling you that this seems like a very uniquely American religion you're dealing with. Guess what? They're right.
Right. Really? Why do you say that?
Well, what we're dealing with is an example of the esoteric child, right? Mm-hmm. Esotericism, people are like, oh gosh, that sounds weird. Esotericism is just hidden knowledge, right?
Yes.
Yes. And you've probably encountered hidden knowledge before. You can go all the way back to the ancient world. You know, the hidden knowledge is in the cave. You can only see it by torchlight with the elders explaining the history to you, that sort of thing, right? This mystery religion. Well, esotericism is the idea that there's an invisible world that is disconnected from the material, right? Gnosis is probably the best known term of that. And it's been a part of American religion for a long time. And in the modern era, the sort of new age melting pot of ideas has produced an esoteric child called the Indigo Children, which has certain resonances with trans kids because they come from the same stuff, right? It's the same source material kind of underlining it philosophically. And that's true always of text, right? If I were to take the collected texts of Mr. Glinner there, Mr. Linehan, I would probably find some sources, right? You've had influences from sitcoms that you've watched all your life and probably informed the way you've written. So you have sources.
Yes.
The New Testament has sources from the Old Testament and so forth and so on. Everything has sources. And no religion comes into the world whole cloth. They don't spring out full formed. No, every single religion is a pastiche to some extent of previous ideas and previous sort of iterations. So when you have in the 1970s in America, you have this very febrile atmosphere that we're starting to see the mainline denominations in America declining. And so you have alternative ideas coming in. A lot of that's, stuff that's like after the hippie movement and whatnot. But this story actually starts in the 70s with a woman named Nancy Ann Tappe, Tappe, who claimed to be a synesthete. That is someone who can see colors around your head, right? Auras.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you can trick yourself into seeing auras if you want to. It's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
And then, you can pay hundreds of dollars to someone to take your spirit photo and show you all the colors and describe how you're an indigo child. And in fact, my first exposure to this was she published her book, Tappe published her book in 1986. And the following year, I was a kid. I was at something called the Harmonic Convergence. And I was informed by someone who claimed to be Native American. And I don't know if she was really that or not, but she told me in no uncertain terms that I was an indigo child.
Right.
What is that? And when you look at the characteristics, the supposed characteristics of the indigo child, what happens is the same thing you see with the trans kid phenomenon, right? It's various characteristics being sort of swept up into a category. You're discursively constructing the category, as we have, we talked about Michel Foucault and philosophy. You've already had that discussion on your show. Here are some characteristics from Lee Carroll and Jan Tober. These are two of the people who started selling Indigo children stuff in the 1990s with books and so forth. And Lee Carroll,
before we go into them, Matt, can I just say, like, one of this may seem like it kind of comes out of nowhere, but the Indigo children, they did like, people like Oprah took this very seriously, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oprah definitely is a big part of this story. As a matter of fact, historians of ideas will want to know where our country sort of had this weird phase right now, and I would point them towards Oprah. She is the single biggest source of woo, pseudoscience, new age, gibberish. It's all come through her, and
it's interesting, isn't it? Because she's like, like her show was kind of like a massive Twitter account for Oprah, through which she was able to spread ideas throughout the 90s before Twitter became a thing. That might sound like a weird comparison, but I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of people have been influenced by her because there were so few other voices. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I can show you academic historiography now about Oprah as a key figure in American religion, because that's what she is.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
So that's what's going on. It's an American tradition carrying on through Oprah, and it's got these new sort of elements to it, some of which are familiar, some of which are not. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Graham. You may have noticed this, but my country is way more religious than your country.
Yes.
Like a lot more.
We have noticed.
You have noticed. And as a matter of fact, if you take all the countries of the world, and you measure income level, right? There's a certain income level. It's about 24,000 pounds in British money, or about 30,000 American. And we'll include Artie. All right, 38,000 Canadian. Okay. That level of income is where church participation drops below 50% per week. That is, you are less than 50% likely for an individual person to go to church in that country when the per capita income reaches that level.
Okay.
Every country ever studied, except for the United States. The United States, we call ourselves the exceptional country. This is one thing that makes us very exceptional. So Oprah is part of that. And she had this boy on in 1999 who was, of course, an Indigo Child. And the child that in question, his name was Matty Stepanek. And it's kind of tragic. He died of... it was a rare form of muscular dystrophy, I want to say, at the age of 13. So very tragic. But he was a published poet at age 9. So he's kind of a prodigy. And therefore, an Indigo, definitely, he's very special. So we have to have him. Here he is talking about the negative energies. And Oprah says, well, when the negative energies come to you, what happens? And of course, because he wants to please the adult, what does he do? He says, oh, well, I get all fidgety. Like I've never known a child that got fidgety, right? Okay. Do they talk to you? She says. All right. And of course, wanting to please the adult, well, sometimes, but not here, not now. I don't want to be interrogated on it right now.
Yes.
And she says, she immediately says, oh, well, that's, of course, because there's good energies in here. We have good vibrations in here, right?
Right.
So, it's obviously an adult leading a child through this. It's manipulation.
Coaching.
Yes, it's coaching. I mean, look at the characteristics of the Indigo Child. They come into the world with a feeling of royalty. Have you ever known a child who just seemed to feel like they were royal?
Yeah.
Right, that's never happened before. That's a whole new thing in history. And this whole idea that these new children are emerging, that they have some sort of psychic energy, that they connect with each other in some kind of way, that they're going to save the world, right? They're going to fix all the problems.
Yes.
Does that sound familiar? We're going to save the trans kids to save ourselves. We're going to save the Indigo children to save ourselves.
Can I ask the people who are in the comments, there was a screen grab of a mermaids thing where they listed all the things that may say if your child is trans. I think I posted it recently. If someone has the link to that, could they send it? Because I'd love to show people what we're talking about here. There's some extraordinary things in that list.
Right. See, there you go. It's a discursive construction of an esoteric child. It's got the child knows who they are. We have to trust the child because they are completely innocent of our world, and that's why they speak only truth, right? Now think how far back that goes, right? Moloch wanted the innocent blood. You have to have the child innocent blood because that's the most powerful magic that makes the rain come, right?
What was Moloch again? For those
Moloch was an ancient Canaanite god or Phoenician god.
So
my point is
child sacrifices there?
Child sacrificing cult, yes. So you go at very far in history, this is going on. And what we're seeing is kind of a current modern iteration. I should point out that Indigo Children, what it developed into in the first decade of the 21st century is kind of a reaction against medicalizing the quote unquote problem child of the American classroom, the ADD, ADHD, autism spectrum kind of problem, right? So it's a reaction against medicalization. That's different from the esoteric trans child, of course, which we have to medicalize that child in order to release the secret knowledge inside of the child, right?
Yes.
So it's older. And it's as recently as 2011, this was on CNN, and it was, Anderson Cooper, to his credit, is being very tongue-in-cheek, but, are these kids being manipulated by their parents, or is there something to their unusual claims? And you find our old friend, James Randi. Remember James Randi, the amazing Randi?
Yeah.
There he is in 2006 in the Chicago Tribune saying that the parents of these Indigo children don't know the difference between fantasy and reality. Right?
Wow.
So this is an old thing, and it runs parallel. And I'm not saying that it's the same. I'm saying that it's a very interesting case study that you place side by side and you see those similarities. It's just really resonant.
Well, it seems to be something that people want, in the sense that, now religion is disappearing faster and faster from people's lives. Like you pointed out, that these things came about in the febrile atmosphere after the hippie movement and so on. And we can also point to things like the satanic panic, crystals, all these things that kind of blossomed after that. But it does seem that there's a kind of real hungering for religion and belief that's playing out amongst these people.
Oh yes. Yes, there is a certain emptiness. And you do already see this kind of change happening, as I just sent you a DM a little while ago, as a matter of fact, about another church where you can see they're incorporating the rainbow into the liturgy, right?
Yes,
the liberal American religions are now doing this, and that makes our problem that we're dealing with both easier to confine, right? Keep it in church. We can do that. But at the same time, because it goes into a church, it becomes harder to destroy.
Yes, exactly. I've noticed the similar thing has happened over here with the Church of England. The Church of England has recently made some ridiculous statements about trans kids. Again, I always find it so extraordinary that people don't do the basic research into what's going on. But they've been doubling down on this idea that there is such a thing as a trans status, and it's an internal soul and all this sort of stuff. They've been joining in with that. But as you say, it is good because it kind of marks it out as what it is, which is a belief system, a religious belief system.
Right. It becomes both easier to deal with in some ways and harder to deal with in others. Right. So it's morphing before our eyes, is my point. And that's where the whole discussion started, as I wanted to explain to you why I think it's changing before our eyes. Yes.
It's so interesting. I'm also thinking of things like, I remember in the Victorian years, there were the two girls who discovered the fairies and fooled Arthur Conan Doyle. I don't know if you know about that story. But
I do.
Yeah. But there is this belief that children, and I know when I was, when I had kids, very early on, they would really spook my wife by talking or pointing at something that wasn't there. And there was a real feeling of, what did I see? There is an idea that kids are connected to something beyond us. Yeah.
Right. The sixth sense, right?
Yes.
That's a perfect example of the cultural meme of the esoteric child. Perfect example.
Yes.
Then Peter Pan is another good example, right?
Why is Peter Pan an example?
Well, if you believe hard enough in Tinkerbell, she'll live, right?
Right. So that's what's going on here as well. That's so true. The fucking thing about trans kids, save trans kids. This idea that there's a trans Holocaust, this idea that trans kids are in danger, and none of it is true. It's all being kind of wished into belief.
Well, the Indigo kids are in danger too. They're in danger from a world that doesn't understand them and just wants to crush their dreams and so forth. Right?
I'm sorry, but I feel we haven't really explained. How would you explain if you were just to tell someone, well, my audience here, what an Indigo Child was? What exactly are they supposed to be doing? Why Indigo?
That's the thing. This woman, Nancy Antap, is a synesthete. She sees auras, and these are kids coming into the world with these new purple auras, right? I've never seen these purple auras before, and they're coming into the world and they're new, is the idea.
Yeah.
And they've also been called, you may find them mentioned as star children. Oh, that's certainly not a Kubrick ripoff, I'm sure. Also, crystal children. There's a couple other terms out there. Crystal children is supposed to be, those indigo kids, those are last generation. These are the new crystal kids. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
So,
great.
And the idea is that, again, they're going to save us because they've got special psychic powers in this new generation that allow them to, make a world that doesn't have war and where the environment, and the animals, or whatever.
And in the trans kids' case, a world where there's no gender, where there's no
right,
sexism.
Exactly. It's a different kind of heaven, but still, it's a promise of a kind of esoteric heaven that comes from inside the kids. They've got it in them. Yeah.
It's I did anyone find that link? No one found it. I had it it was just a list of things. Basically, Mermaids had a list. They put it up and they said, signs your child may be trans. And they and as you remember, they listed simply every single characteristic that one would associate with being either a teenager or a child.
I know. It's just you're describing teenagers. You're describing just children. You're not describing something that really feels new to me, right?
Yes. And also and the coaching as well. You can like the thing that when Oprah is talking to that kid, I'll share the video underneath this so you can actually see the interview. But when Oprah is talking, it's quite clear that Oprah is kind of just getting answers that Oprah wants to get. It's extraordinary to watch it play out now, actually, because it feels like the type of thing that, I don't know, should have been more controversial or should have, been stepped on as a, do you know what I mean?
Well, it didn't seem harmful, right? It doesn't seem harmful. It's just kids, and they're special, and they have special abilities, and they're creative and talented and smarter than previous generations of kids, or maybe just parents want to believe that their kids are special. Either way, that seems kind of harmless. Trans kids phenomenon, though, is not harmless.
Yes,
as we've seen.
Yes,
it's interesting. And that's the problem. You're talking about America. And in the United States of America, we will let children die before anybody does anything about a religion. I mean, guns are a religion here. You've seen how that works.
Yeah.
And, not to get too political, but we have all kinds of issues. And this is a land where people will not give medical care to a child because, that's going against their religion or something, and the child dies. And oftentimes, even a prosecution will happen and the court will set aside a sentence.
Yes.
Because courts don't want to get into the question of whether a belief is real or not. And again, that's why it becomes a kind of defensive space or defensive shell into which the religion can retract, right? You can't get in here.
Yes, that's really interesting. It's like the way I don't know if this is a similar thing, but the way Scientology, became a religion simply by offering the FBI that they drop all their lawsuits against the FBI, and as soon as the FBI called them a religion, Scientologists were able to just live in this world of madness for 20 or 30 years.
Scientology is a uniquely American religion, right? That's a recent religion, and it's got sources. right? We can see the pop psychology texts that Hubbard ripped off.
Yes. Yes.
So you can see there's a good example of what we're talking about. And in terms of esotericism, they wait until you get to OT3 before they tell you about Xenu and all
that's my favorite
crazy stuff.
That's my favorite story about Paul Haggis. That may not be true, but I believe he was brought into an interview when he was at that level, and only then realized that he was with a bunch of crazy people, and he had spent
I think
years.
It's in his. Isn't it in the opening scene of his little documentary about Scientology? I thought it was.
I think so.
It may be.
Yeah. But that's just so funny that and also very interesting because it shows that Scientology, apart from being insane, is so clever in the way that it hides its own lore, and this, I guess, is esotericism, from its members until they reach a certain stage. It feels, again, quite analogous to the trans phenomenon, because a lot of the people who you see going trans rights, and they often just don't know what it involves. They don't know that lesbians are being coerced. They don't know that kids are being manipulated and medicalized. They seem to, every time these things are brought up, it's kind of explained away as, oh, that's propaganda. That's propaganda. Are these things that you see associated with these kind of religions?
Every religion wants to claim that it has the lock on truth, right? That's always the case. Maybe I'm not quite clear on your question. What exactly are you trying to ask me? Maybe you can ask again. And
well, let me put it another way. Let's look at an element of trans rights activism that we are now all only too used to, which is the savagery that it meets non-believers, and the kind of anger and ferocity, the treatment that people like Dave Chappelle and J.K. Rowling have.
The outsider, yes. Well, sure. I mean,
these seem to me like features of a religion as well.
Oh yes. Religions always want to impose blasphemy rules, right? Religions always want to. Well, if we're going to build paradise on earth, because that's what most religions are trying to do, and America is a place where people have done that over and over and over again, trying to build paradise on earth. So that's just part of written into our narrative as a country.
Yes.
And sure, you can see a lot of hostility. I mean, if you check out, for example, the origins of the Church of Latter-day Saints. I'm not going to make fun of LDS. I got a lot of friends who are Mormons. My point is that if you check out the history, right, there it is. There was violence, and it's not just one side doing it, right? So all religions are like that. I just, in this last term, I took a class on the historical Muhammad. And did you know that there were other prophets in Arabia at the time doing similar things?
I know Jesus was also considered, some people believe Jesus was also a collection of about 7 or 8 people that were just kind of amalgamated,
Yeah, there's all sorts of theories about that. And again, early Christianity is a great example of how esoteric ideas can sort of inform religion, but you know what? It's the literalists who actually end up in charge 9 times out of 10, because literalism, fundamentalism, always has a certain power, shall we say, that is lacking in a religion that says, "Oh, well, you have to understand that it's a mystery, that it's not literally true." That's actually not the great way to build a religion. To really have a successful religion, it needs to be literally true. I am literally female.
Right. Yes. And that makes it kind of makes it, again, this difficult thing of religion where it's harder to fight and easier to fight in some ways. The interesting thing about this particular battle is that the skeptics movement in the UK and America, with people like P.Z. Myers and so on, seems to have just been completely taken in by it.
Sure.
But it is, as you say, it's a religion, and they literally do believe in sexes changing and stuff like that. It seems that why do you think groups like them have had trouble dealing with this stuff?
There's a certain there's a certain aspect to belief that we all want to believe something. It's right there in the word believe. We all want to have something that is available to us that is fundamentally true about the universe, I guess. But if historians of ideas, when they want to know exactly where the skeptics and the atheists went wrong, I'm going to point to when in, I think it was 2015, that Danny Moscato put on lipstick and took on holy pronouns and became the Aerophant gender priest, and was not immediately laughed out of the room.
Yeah. Moscato is extraordinary. Like when he got into that woman's shelter, he wasn't presenting as a woman at all. He was just a fat, bald guy like me, you know. Well, no, sorry, I'm not bald, but you know what I mean. He was trolling. It would look to me very like he was trolling, and yet people took him so seriously. I remember Jamila, she tweeted that he was one of the great feminist thinkers. This bloke who had bluffed his way into a women's shelter to have a troll.
But you're asking me that question, and I'm thinking, actually, I just watched a documentary about John of God last night.
What's John of God again?
John of God was this Brazilian faith healer guy who was like raping little girls and women on the one hand and healing people on the other. And I was watching this documentary about him, and I'm thinking, like the protection that he got from people around him, like that it was not in anybody's interest to come to grips with what was going on right in front of them. Right. And so to some extent, what we're seeing in say, like with Amy Challoner, for example, isn't that normal for religions? Isn't it actually normal for the Catholic Church to have a priest problem? Isn't it normal for the Southern Baptist Conference here in the United States to have issues with, they're having sort of they're not Catholic, but they're having kind of a pastor issue now. A report has come out about all sorts of horrible sex crimes and shenanigans taking place over the years.
Yes.
This feels sort of normal, actually.
That is, yeah, it does. I mean, like I think it's the thing that kind of keeps hitting me about this is the religiosity of the people involved. Like I was thinking about this yesterday, and when Father Ted came out, surely religion was on the way out at that stage anyway. But the reaction that we got was so kind of calm and measured, and some priests were actually going, yeah, it's good or whatever, and kind of, But like I thought that would have been very different in the 50s. In the 50s, they would have really tried to go for it. There would have been blasphemy charges and all sorts of things. But in the 90s, it didn't have the strength anymore. But what I'm currently facing now, with ironically enough, the Father Ted musical being in danger of not being produced because of these people, is 1,000 times worse than the reaction we got to Ted. But it does feel religious in nature. Like, as you say, this belief in clearly untrue statements like trans women are women, and I'll never forget how astonished I was when I realized that they meant it literally. They meant that literally. And I think
it's not a polite fiction. It's a fundamentalist biblical literalism. What?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. Your people will like this. I was over here at Netroots Nation in 2018. I was doing a bunch of different stuff, but Netroots Nation is progressive activists conference, huge conference. And on the first day of the conference, I go to the morning reproductive rights panel, and there are two women there talking about pronouns. Roe v. Wade is under threat like never before in my lifetime. What's going on? Pronouns and hormones are going to save us. And then they're done. And then this 6 foot tall Black trans woman starts to do a Sojourner Truth speech about ain't I a woman? And, reproductive rights are in my interest because, stem cells and uterus transplants. Well, I might need an abortion one day. Oh, great. Now men can have abortions.
Yeah.
I gotta fuck out of there.
And also, the further and further it travels away from women's health and women's rights, the easier it is for the right to oppose it. the right wing
Yes.
to say, well, this is obviously crazy. We're gonna crack down on it. Yeah, it's been interesting watching the abortion debate and how next to impossible it is for women to talk about this issue without being accused of leaving trans people out. It's extraordinary. But listen, Matt, I want to kind of wrap it up.
Sure.
I'd love to get you back on again to talk about these issues,
sure.
because it's very interesting. And I should say that Matt's Substack, which I'll link to below, is really, really great on all this stuff. And if you're interested in some of the things we spoke about today, then please do subscribe to him.
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to say real quick before we go, I am coming to London sometime in the next year. So
okay, great. Well, let's hook up. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we need to. Yeah, we'll show you how they can drink. It's quite a thing.
All right,
Matt, lovely to speak to you.
You too.
Let's talk about other aspects of this. I do really find the religious aspect interesting. The belief in these kind of magical qualities. It's all worth talking about more. So thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. See you soon. That was Matt Osborne. As I say, I'll link to his blog, and I'll also link to that link to the interview with the Indigo Child, which is really interesting. Matt also sent me a couple of screen grabs of mentions of Indigo children before and after Oprah's interview, and it went like that. And the same with trans child. As soon as trans child was introduced as a concept, suddenly everyone was talking about their trans child. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed that. It's all very interesting, and I will see you again for another one of these at some point. Bye-bye.